Here we go.
Okay, let's do it.
Just need Harry.
Wow. Okay, we're back in open session, Brian, and I wanted to go ahead and report out of closed session this morning. And in our closed session this morning, we had a robust conversation about what's happening at CalSTRS and what will be happening at CalSTRS moving forward. And so I want to report out, but I want to give our CEO, Jack Ehnes, a chance to share his thoughts before I share more of the process that came out of closed session. So, Jack?
Thank you. Well, the cat's out of the bag since we've told our staff this morning, and probably a few are watching on the screen now, but I have reached that crossroads in life for some more adventures. So I have announced my impending retirement effective September 1st. So after much thinking, reflection, talking with family, it just felt like this was the right time to do this. Most of, not just all the nearly 19 years in December, but almost my entire work life, I have either been on a board or worked for a board. It is, for whatever reason, my career has been shaped by board relationships. And without doubt, I think the trust that we've established with you and the accountability that you demand from us has been special. And I can honestly say that, we've all learned a lot together, and we've made sure that the system has stayed honest and moving forward at all times. Some of you are newer, some of you have been here a long time, but through my nearly 19 years, the organization has changed a real lot. As I'm getting notes from staff this morning, our longer-term employees know just how dramatically different it is. And it's important to say that it isn't just when I started work here in 2002. That what the point of that is, we changed a lot in 2002 from top to bottom, and then we changed again and again and again. And I think you should take with it that this is an organization that doesn't have that embedded resistance to change, that there's a recognition that improvement matters a lot to everyone, and that people will receive that from leadership when it's the right leadership in the organization. I'm humored a bit because the private sector is now discovering that there's more to being in business than making money. This idea of purpose that was surfaced last year from some of our conversations, and everybody knows that in this building. It didn't require that revelation last year, I think, to bring that to everyone's attention. We know that the best way to have an engaged membership is to have an engaged staff. You don't just focus on customer service, and first, that's usually the first thing everybody goes to. You focus on your staff and making sure that this is a place people want to come to work every day, that it's fun, that we celebrate together, and from that comes engagement with your customer base, and things are better there. So, what's embedded here is a very mission-driven, it's in the DNA to do the right thing. And I think that comes from our emphasis on integrity and ethics. That has to be part of what we do in business. It's always disappointing to see companies that miss the mark in that. But that's certainly not been the case. A lot more time to make speeches before September, but I always want to say that, I feel like I've been the stimulus for this change. And that is my personality, is to always stretch people, stretch organizations. But it is the organization that did all the hard work here, not me, in making this organization turn out to where it's been. So I'm thanking everybody that's watching, if anyone's still watching here, and because it's because of them that we are where we are today. So we shall proceed for 6 months.
That's right.
I'll make some more changes. Who knows?
We've got a lot of work still left to do in the next 6 months. So,
Thank you.
And before I get into the details of our closed session, I just want to say how grateful this board is for me being on this board for 8 years to be able to work with a CEO with your integrity and your strategic vision. If you've ever been with Jack up in his office, he's always looking out that window, like what's happening in West Sac, and kind of just always thinking about the future. And I'm kind of wired that way, so I really appreciate your strategic vision. I think having our building in West Sac has proven to be kind of prophetic. I think there's really exciting things happening with the bridge and just the energizing kind of nature that CalSTRS brings to the west side of Sacramento, I think is really significant. So Jack has communicated with all the executive staff, one-on-one. He's talked to, he sent an email to staff in the building this morning. So we just wanted to make sure that the stakeholders, in the room that come here all the time, that you hear it from Jack's own voice first. But yeah, I mean, we have 6 more months, so I feel like today really is kind of a chance for you to share with everyone the exciting next chapter in your life beyond this year. It's a big deal to have a CEO serve in a pension fund for 19 years. If you read Pensions and Investments, which I nerd out and read all the time because I'm chairing this board now, if you follow pension systems around the world, it is very rare to have someone serve for 19 years and to have Chris Ailman as our CEO for as long. So we're very blessed at CalSTRS to have steady leadership for so long. But it also feels like, I think as we talk to our members about retirement, I mean, retirement's a very personal decision for our members, and you have to kind of decide when it's right for you. And I really applaud that the way that you've done this has been very collaborative with the board. And just so that the public knows, part of the board's responsibility always, whether it's when a CEO leaves or not, is to do succession planning. You always have to be thinking about, when leadership changes, how does the board and the structure of CalSTRS ensure that when there's changes, especially in roles like CEO and CIO, it's a big deal. And so the board has actually been actively working on a succession plan for several years now, just to let everybody know. But then more recently, when Jack was more clear about the time frame, that's when we sort of worked together to kind of how to unfold this process in a way that allows Jack to kind of share his own personal timeline, and then for the board to get to work on ramping up our succession planning. So it's a really important responsibility, and I wanted to report out a couple of the decisions that we made this morning in our closed session, so that we established a search committee, and that's going to help us to assist to get an executive recruiter and to get a competitive search for CalSTRS next CEO. It'll be interesting to see who that next person will be. The members of the search committee are Harry Keeley, Denise Bradford, Joy Higa, Karen Yamamoto, Controller Yi, and myself. And in the coming months, the search committee and the board will work together to accomplish these activities. We're planning a proper send-off for Jack later on in the year. So I feel like today it's emotional just because we're kind of processing the information, but we'll have plenty of chances to celebrate and party and say nice, amazing things about your legacy here at CalSTRS. So we're looking forward to celebrating that. I also think, since I joined the Principles for Responsibility PRI board. I can't even think right now because I'm the PRI board. It's your reputation as a global leader on sustainability is so significant. And as I wrote my little blurb for your press release today, I was thinking about just when I travel now around the world, which I know some of us do that, you just hear about Jack Ehnes and your contribution to the thought leadership, really. And I think that's a rare thing for some. I mean, I interact with a lot of different leaders, and I think that you have contributed so much to things like the GRI and SASB and the relationships that you've built at Ceres. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I think that reflects so well on our organization as well, and it will continue to reflect well on us as you move on this next year. I was going to mention, like our former board chair, Dana Dillon, it's hard to put in words the legacy that you have had here. It's interesting to have Dana retire and now to have you retire. It's like 2 really significant people in the leadership of CalSTRS are moving forward onto a next adventure. But I have a feeling you're going to be skiing a lot and then probably continuing to add thought leadership in the world in some way. But on behalf of the board, I think we all want to just express to you today just our extreme appreciation. Just 19 years is a long time. And And it's a long time for there not to be, gosh, am I becoming Dana Dillon, you guys? I'm becoming Dana. Dana, are you watching right now? Oh my gosh. But I think a lot of us work in other industries, and you read the paper and almost every day there's somebody embezzling money or doing just bad stuff, basically. And, I grew up Presbyterian, so it's kind of like, you want just people why can't people just be good people? And Jack, you're good people. And I think that's a good model for the members of our system. So you're an exemplary leader. And I'll stop. But we're just excited. I mean, it's nice to have 6 months together to kind of continue to celebrate the work that you do. And I just know that you're going to change the word retirement into something cool like the next adventure or whatever it is, because I really think the nature of retirement is changing, obviously, and people are doing other things as they move on. And I'm sure you'll rewrite the history books on what retirement looks like. So we'll look forward to seeing it. Okay. It looks like there's somebody that wants to public comment. So Ed Foley, do you want to?
I know we're going to discuss a lot of things about Jack and how good he's been for us. I just want to invite everyone to give Jack a standing ovation that he deserves.
I did want to invite, if there are other board comments at this point, I know we're going to have plenty more chances, but if there are any other comments from board members, I would welcome those. And there's tissues right here if anyone needs them. So. All right, so we'll have plenty more opportunities, I think, moving forward to celebrate you, Jack, but thanks again for that. And again, to the public, we have a search committee, and that search committee will be meeting right now several times in between board meetings, and we'll continue to report out in open session when appropriate about our activities, and we will keep you posted on the search. Okay? Okay. All right. We're moving on. Brian, am I good? Okay. Phew. All right. Item 7. It just feels weird to... Okay, item 7. Segue. That's some closed session here.
Oh, sorry, never mind.
All right, so this is regulatory proposal administrative remedy process for employer audits.
All right, you said segue.
I know,
it is hard to find a segue.
It's a little hard to, yeah.
So, but I thought of one. Grant Boykin, Public Affairs. I think the best way to honor the legacy is to continue the commitment to the mission. And so with that, I have before you today a proposal to, we're looking for direction from the board to begin drafting regulations that would ensure that we treat all similarly affected members affected by an audit in a consistent manner. Right now, under the current regulations, currently, CalSTRS informs the applicant and the entity who's been audited of their right to an administrative hearing, but CalSTRS only has visibility into the population of an audit that was actually sampled. So under the current regulations, only the sampled members are known, so we can notify them about the audit process. But members in the systematic population don't necessarily know about the audit, don't necessarily know if their benefits are changed, whether that has to do with the audit. And if they do find out, it's likely that they will be finding out beyond the 90 days that are required from the final audit to appeal. So what we're recommending is that the board direct staff to begin drafting the proposed regulations, allowing us to treat all similarly affected members the same in terms of appeal, or similarly in terms of the ability to appeal. And so with the board's approval, we'll engage with stakeholders. And I want to assure you, we've been engaging for a while. This has been a problem that we've seen and stakeholders have brought to us. And then we'll come back at a future meeting. I don't know if that would be July, probably realistically would be the earliest that we would come back to begin with what we call initiating the formal rule-making process. So if you have any questions, I've got Joycelyn with me and Raina, who handles the appeals process.
Thanks, Grant. And are you looking, so right now it's listed as an information item. Are you looking for us to take action, or are you just letting us know about
I think we're looking for direction, and I'm not sure. I'll look at our general counsel to see, do we need a motion, or is it good enough to get direction?
It's just get, I'm sorry. It's just here to present the idea to you and get your initial feedback and any direction you want to give staff.
Great. Thanks, Grant. Betty?
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate this proposal coming before us, and I definitely would support moving forward in terms of the engaging with stakeholders and forming the initial drafting team. I think that makes sense. I had a couple questions, I guess, just from looking at, I guess, more practically speaking, because I don't know the answers to these, and that is, if we actually change a member's compensation following an audit, is it, how is that posted? Is it posted to a member's account or flagged on a member's account? I'm just...
So once Raina Minoya, Assistant General Counsel, once a member's benefit is adjusted, whether it's from additional employer re-reporting or internal adjustment, all retired members do receive a notification from CalSTRS letting them know that their benefit has been adjusted.
Okay, so right after that. Got it. And then are members who've been notified about audit findings because they were part of an audit sample, do they typically pursue an administrative hearing?
I apologize, I don't have the metrics on that.
Okay.
I would say the majority do not.
Do not, okay.
Yeah, when you look at the number of audits that are conducted in a calendar year,
Yeah.
The number of appeals that we receive from them are less than 10% out of the total population of the audited sample.
Okay.
And that would be less than 10% for both employers and or members. If any member or employer within an audit requests an appeal, we just count that as one in terms of the data that we compile.
Okay, great. So I would, so no action but just direction, is that? Okay, well, I support staff moving forward.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Betty. Karen?
Hi, I support this recommendation as well, but I also wanted to make sure that something in the regs should be considered for members that are out of state, and another form of communication other than email. Because I know that some of the retirees are not as technically savvy or into email, so just make sure that that other form of communication is available to them.
Thank you. We'll note
Thank
that.
you.
And Karen, it's my understanding that all of the benefit adjustment letters are mailed to their address on file.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Good. I don't see any other questions, so is the will of the board, yeah. So we'd give you direction to go ahead and engage with stakeholders and form an internal drafting team and proceed forward.
Okay,
So you'll be
thank you.
coming back to us, Grant? Perfect. Thanks, you guys. Thanks, Joyce Lynn. All right. Jack, the CEO report. Do you have anything to report, Jack? Anything going on in your life
Nothing
right
nearly
now?
as exciting, but I am excited about this DocuSign, and I hopefully, I don't know if you've all used that in your personal
I
financial
have,
transactions,
yeah,
but
I have. It's
if you
great.
have, you know how amazing it were, how easy it is to work.
Yeah.
And I've been, everybody behind me knows how frustrated I've been that we've not moved our penetration beyond about 25 to 28% of our teachers using our online retirement application. And I do think the spousal signature issue is some of the problem. I mean, not all of it, but some of the problem for sure. So we're excited about piloting this, and I'm hoping to get the number up to getting that to where it would be. I mean, we want this still to be a voluntary, there are a few entities that have made it mandatory to do service retirement online, but we're not there in our thinking for doing that. So we want to do this, incent people to do it online, but we're not at a point of requiring it for sure. We'd have to do that by legislation anyway. So that, and in terms of the construction project, we gave you a pretty detailed report. We are working through some problems with the fire marshal's office that may require some design modifications. We're right in the heart of those discussions with them this week and next week. So probably by next report, I'll have more detail if we had to make some modifications in that design issue. But from a budgetary time perspective, this is a love-hate thing with weather. I mean, obviously, we want good snowpack this year. We want the reservoirs to be full, but we don't want it raining on our construction site. And so those things don't work together, actually. But we are ahead in that sense on rain days, which cost money to us. So we're doing real well in the construction part of this project right now, really well. It's starting to cause a little chaos out there because we got so many cement trucks coming in into the site. So there's an awful lot of truck traffic on the street out there. That's all I was going to highlight.
Jack on his report.
And we just sent out the press release. I just saw it here.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a press release coming out on Jack's
Yep.
announcement on retirement. So you might get people asking you about that. I'm guessing
might.
probably even the next few minutes. So, great.
All right.
Thanks, Jack.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we've got a couple of consent items. The pension solution project update. I'm wondering if we do want to just hear, because I know it's on consent, but we can pull it to hear a little bit about the data. I wonder if we could do that, Prashant. Okay, can we do that? Or
Yep. We're prepared to do that
Prashant,
for sure.
do you know what I'm talking about, Prashant? I think there were some
Testing.
data, the testing
Yep,
issues,
testing.
and I just wondered if we could just have you talk about that. That was one thing. If other board members have other issues, I think that was one thing that kind of stood out to me on the pension solution update that was provided to us. Sure, do you want to?
So I'm sure we are talking about the system testing delays that we are experiencing, right? Yep. So in the planning phase, Team CGI made certain assumptions, and those assumptions were that we are going to perform system testing for 6 months period, and here's the assumptions, which is that we are going to be executing so many test cases, and here is going to be my expected pass rate. And hence, I will need 6 months with this workforce to finish the task. And as they spend more time into testing, what they're realizing is that those assumptions were not accurate. So essentially, they are executing less test cases as compared to what they expected, and their pass rate is less than what they expected. So with that situation, they have done two things so far, talking about what mitigation is in place. One is they have added about 18 to 20 additional staff from CGI side to put more workforce into the work, and that has pulled the schedule way back in. Plus, they are also anticipating that they will need about 7 to 8 extra weeks to finish the system testing. Now, with that being said, there are about 15 to 20 different activities that will happen between now and go live, and this is just one activity. So what's going to happen is that now, if CGI needs 7 to 8 more weeks to finish system testing, what is the impact? I mean, are we risking the go live date? Are we risking the budget? Are we risking anything else? So based on what we know so far, we don't see any risk to the go live date. We don't see any risk to the addition to the budget and to the quality of the system. It's more like, and in our planning, we already had 3 months of contingency built in before go live. So in case any planned activity takes longer, we can tap on in that contingency without risking the go live or without risking the budget or without risking the quality of the solution.
Does that mean that, so am I understanding correctly that CGI kind of has up to 3 months to kind of fix some of these issues around the data not being accurate? Am I understanding that?
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
However, I think...
So you don't look at it as a huge risk because you have this buffer of time.
Yes.
So for us as a board, it's not, I mean, even though it's yellow and red, you're just being transparent about this being an issue.
Yes.
It's on the CGI side, not on our side. And there's kind of a built-in contingency of time. Okay.
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure because I know some people reading that had, yep. And Cassandra, do you want to add?
And even though, we have 3 months contingency, but this is one step of about 12 to 15 that we need to have that contingency account for.
Okay.
And even though it's 7 to 8 weeks, it's really only going to eat about a month into the contingency because of the overlapping processes or the workflow. So we don't anticipate using 7 or 8 weeks of that contingency, but only 4 weeks.
Okay.
So we are still going to preserve, we are likely going to preserve 2 additional months of contingency still available for us to deal with any other surprise that may happen.
And so in the May meeting, you can report back to us and
Absolutely.
just let us know
Yes.
what's happening with that contingency, so we
Yes.
just can be updated since, okay. Betty?
Thank you. No, I had the same question about time, but maybe addressing this also, I see Graham's in the audience as well, but in terms of CGI resources, do you think those are sufficient to try to get the solution delivery back on track?
So based on the information, so CGI is still trying to finalize some of the action plan that moving forward, what type of resources and what type of timeline they are going to work with, even though we have a general idea. Now, to begin with, right now they have 53 testers who are testing the system. Earlier, I think the number of testers they planned was around in the range of 30 or something like this. So they added about 18 more staff. They are, based on our information, they are at a point where adding more people is not a solution to the problem anymore. So they have reached that threshold where there is not much ROI if I keep adding more resources, because there is a level of expertise and experience needed to bring the output. So again, we are still trying to, we are not ruling out any opportunity where adding more resources cannot be done, but it's at a point where they have done whatever they could from the resourcing perspective. And now it's time that let's tap on some of the contingency to make it a viable execution plan, I guess, moving forward. Yeah.
Graham, do you have a-
Yeah, I was basically going to make the same point that Prashant did, that sort of point of diminishing returns in adding additional staff just on this, the Cat B system testing piece. But what we are looking at is the next set of testing activities that are going to be happening and revisiting the assumptions around those, because I think there were some assumptions that proved not to be totally accurate. So let's revisit the assumptions that we had for the follow-on processes and anticipate if there are going to be any similar challenges, and then relook at the resourcing there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. That's it. I don't see any other questions, so thanks, Prashant, thanks, Graham. Okay. So we have items, items 10 and 11. If you recall, 11 has the different committee reports, the minutes, the board member education. Those are all on consent. Is there any request to pull anything? Karen, can you chime in, please? It's okay.
Okay, I'm looking at 11B, the minutes.
Okay.
Just correction on page TRB 39, the name spelling of Charles Denon and the organization reference to Joe Boytel.
I'm telling you, Dana's presence is here. Can you feel it? The tears, the editing, it's happening.
Just testing you.
I know.
Thank you, Ms. Yamamoto. That's excellent. Any other items to be pulled? Otherwise, we can take them on consent. Oh, you are. Sorry, Joy. Go ahead, Joy.
I just have for item 11A, the committee reports, I had one thing I had to read.
Please, go ahead.
So this is for the ARM committee meeting yesterday. By direction of the Audits and Risk Management Committee, I move to ratify the Audit Services Charter as amended by the committee.
Do we need to second that? We don't need to second that, right?
No, because
Okay.
we didn't know. I think it's
Do we
just-
vote then? This is where I'm
I
learning.
think
Okay.
this is still on consent, right?
Do we need,
Motion, and you don't have to have a second.
but if it's on consent, we still need to vote? Okay.
If it's on consent, if it's an action item, no, you just vote on the whole consent.
Okay. So we don't have to do anything. She just read it into the record.
Do you have other ones?
Nope, that's it.
And you would vote on that.
We do vote on that one, okay. That's what I was, okay.
Yeah, just
So,
how many you have.
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Just for item 11 or 10 too?
Just for Joy's,
Just for the
just for that committee.
Thank you.
Audit report. I'm definitely learning more about these formal, at LACCD, it's a lot less formal, right, with the unions? I'm just telling you. Okay, excellent. So items 10 and 11, we've taken on consent and made our edits. Information items, Jennifer? Yeah.
Madam Chair?
Oh, sorry.
On item 10, may I be indicated as an extension?
On item 10?
Yeah.
So state and federal legislation?
Thank you.
Gail Miller, abstaining. Thanks, Gail. Okay, so back to item 12. Any items referred by committee for board decision? That was Joy. New business review for information request, Jennifer. Sorry, I referred you on the wrong one. Okay, awesome. And then let's look at the draft agenda for the next meeting. This is, as you probably noticed, this has been a brief regular board meeting, so that was lovely. But take a look at the agenda for the next meeting. Is there anything, Jack, you want to highlight?
I would just say two things. One, in the interim time between now and the next board meeting, you have a subgroup that'll be reviewing proposals from fiduciary law firms. And and remember, you're taking a different approach, establishing a pool, not a singular company coming back. So that group will have a set of recommendations for you. And item number 9, number 9 was not designed to have law firms in here with the whole board. The work was going to be done by your subgroup. So this is really just a presentation by the group to you of their reflections on what that pool could look like, and you're embracing that. So that's what number 9 is. Most of the time is your annual valuations by Rick and David and Milliman in item number 8. So that will take up a lot of time. Remember, this board's policy has annual elections of chair and vice chair. So that is actually the lead-off item to that. And generally, the chair will ask for your reflections on what committees you would like to be on as well to set that up for the year. So that would be part of it. And while not specifically on here yet, I don't see it on the draft. Yeah, I don't see it on here. We do have to have a time certain because you decided not to delegate the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act hearing for the public comment reg. That's the one we're doing this with. So we will set up a time certain. I'm working with Sharon on that, and to see if anybody from the public has a desire to comment. Generally, they're pretty quiet affairs, but we shall see. And so that will be part of the agenda as well as a formal time set for that. And that's the whole thing, actually.
I think in general, what we're trying to move towards is as much as we can, having our board meetings being 2 days, having the investment, committee usually on a Wednesday and regular board meeting on Thursday. I think is this our first time doing it? I think so. Yeah. So that's our rhythm, because it seems like Fridays have always been challenging. I know, and we're working on appeals as well. So please, board members, give us feedback on that, but we're trying to modify so I think that's the plan for May is investments on Wednesday and regular board meeting on Thursday.
Yes.
Jack?
Yeah, sorry.
Just wanting to make sure.
Yes.
Just 2 days.
Yeah, it fits nicely. It works great.
I think we're able to get all the committee work done around so that we'll just have 2 full days of board meetings.
Yep. All right.
Yeah, we're trying to, make it work and be as effective and efficient as possible with all of our schedules. And I think so far, so good. Great. Thanks,
Good.
Jack.
Okay.
And then we have opportunities for statements from the public. Anybody from the public want to say anything else? You are welcome. And with that, we will adjourn the regular board meeting. Thank you. We are going to take a quick, the board's going to take a quick field trip for about 20 minutes or so. And so we'll come back for comp, I'm guessing, I don't know, what do we think? Where are we? 11:15. I'd say maybe let's aim for 11:45. Jack, can we do that? Can we go out and do the thing and come back in a half an hour, you think?
Yes.
Okay, so 11:45, we'll start compensation. Thanks, everyone. Okay. he might have misunderstood. Okay, excellent. Let me just be faithful to our timing. All right. Okay, everyone, we're going to get the comp committee together. It's 11:45, and just to check in with the committee, I think the intention is to break for lunch around 12:45, if that's okay. If there's too many tummies grumbling, I'll accommodate, but I think we'll try and get through our first big item, take a break for lunch and come back, or get through everything and then go to lunch. So we'll just sort of see how the morning goes. So we are jumping into, do we need to take a roll, James? Okay.
State Controller Yee. Mr. Keeling.
Here.
Ms. Higa.
Here.
Representing the Director of Finance, Ms. Miller.
Here.
Chairperson Hendricks, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you, James. Our first item of business is approval of the committee agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Great. And then item 2 on the consent agenda is approval of our minutes from the July 12, 2019 comp committee. Boy, it was back in July of last year. Okay, that's a ways back. It's been moved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Our minutes have been approved. Thank you. Okay, so we are heading to item number 3, our report and recommendations on our comp strategy. Luis, good morning. We've got Luis Navas from GGA, who's our compensation consultant, and also Melissa Norsha, who's here from HR here at CalSTRS. And I wanted to tee off this conversation. You know, we've had multiple conversations, I think, around compensation, and Luis has given us input over the last few years around looking at our policy, but also, as we've been talking about, the collaborative model, the desire and the idea of thinking about long-term incentives for investment staff. And so I think our intention for the item today really is to focus our conversation. You know, Luis has a presentation and Melissa's available for questions. But I do think what we're looking for is for the committee to really approve the concept of the LTIPs, the long-term incentive plan for today. And then in terms of metrics and details, in terms of numbers and dollar amounts and percentages, that we'll have more conversations around that in May and subsequent comp meetings. Does that make sense? So that's kind of just to kind of focus our attention to sort of a higher level approval of the long-term incentives and a conversation about our policy for today, and then more detail in subsequent meetings. And with that, good morning.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to just first apologize. I usually say hi to everybody. That it seems like it's inappropriate now.
The elbow.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not that I'm being rude, but it's almost like I'm insulting people if I'm actually trying to be friendly. So I don't know, no
Yes,
touching.
it's
So
a different time. That's for sure.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. So we prepared this slide some weeks ago in that, but I actually, based on some input that we received since we posted the deck, I actually want to just go a little bit further back so you know, as board members change on the board of CalSTRS, you know, there's movement, there's loss of IP at times, and so I think it's just beneficial for me to kind of go even further back than July 2019, if I may, for a few minutes. So the issue of the both compensation strategy review and which we'll talk about in a moment around the long-term incentive has been talked about for I'd say about 6 years, okay, for different reasons. So initially, the concept of a long-term incentive has been addressed mainly not actually through us, but through McLaughlin, who has historically come into the board and done a compensation review and analysis based on your peer group. And so they've always talked about it from the perspective of you know, based on your peer group evaluation and competitive analysis, the absence of a long-term incentive is something to bring to your attention. And we've worked as the board's independent advisor with you to say, yes, it's an issue. Yes, we recommend that you work, towards trying to close that gap. We're not proponents of really forcing pay gaps through salary, as an example, because our preference is that any closure in terms of compensation issues be done more on a performance basis. It's more defensible in any case. And so that's actually, from that perspective, the concept of an LTIP has been around for a while. And then about 3 years ago, as management came forward in terms of discussions around the collaborative model, we had a couple of education sessions around what an LTIP is. And more importantly, our view is we're not proponents of just increasing pay for any reason whatsoever. There has to be a business reason to do it, either from an attraction and retention perspective, or in the case of the collaborative model, from a lowering of cost perspective. So that, we had all the way back to, I think, an offsite in San Diego where we did a presentation around not just an LTIP, but the strategic elements of why pension funds are adopting it. So I just wanted to, for the benefit of some of the newer board members, to address that. And so when we fast forward to July 2019, I think the past 2 years or so, management and the board have been working together on getting comfortable around the collaborative model, feeling that it might be the right thing to do. And as part of that, we came forward and said, look, it's our experience that in order for you to adopt something like the collaborative model, which I'm just going to refer generally as bringing in assets in-house to manage, that the types of people that you're going to need to recruit that have that skill set will not come and work for you unless they are offered a similar total compensation package to what they've been receiving, which includes a long-term incentive. And so that's where we finally just said, it'd be just good governance for the board to look at the compensation strategy, in large part because it had already been several years since actually the committee had actually looked at the comp strategy. And so looking at it both in just a general lens, and then also from the lens of how does that compensation strategy need to look based on adopting the collaborative model. So I just wanted to take 5 minutes and explain that. So we then kind of went out and at the November session, we decided to try something different. We usually do one-on-one sessions when we go through and meet with our board member clients and get their input on what their views are around the compensation strategy. And then we take that information back on a confidential basis back to the board to share it. But we decided that, in part because of California laws, to do that as a group. And I think the November session worked quite well and it was effective. We came in, and it's incredible that 6-7 months have actually gone by. We came in, gave an overview of what management's perspectives were, purely from the perspective of what the comp strategy may need to look like in adopting the collaborative model, and then our firm also provided our perspective on that for the committee and the board. And everybody, I think, it was a good discussion that we had. So. Here we are today. We're going to summarize in a couple of the slides kind of what we heard the board say, and then what that means. One of the things that we certainly heard say is that, okay, we get it, Luis. We understand now that regardless of there being a compensation gap historically, that for the purposes of creating significant cost savings for our stakeholders, that the LTIP is something that we would like to consider, not necessarily yet approve, but we want to learn more about it. So that's where we come to March. So as Sharon mentioned, the idea would be if today the committee feels comfortable in terms of the general design, we're not actually making a firm recommendation here today in terms of the final design. We're just giving you what I call a skeleton, a straw man. Around it. that we would then come back to you at the May meeting, as long as we're all permitted to travel then, with much more detail around stress testing, around individual levels, around macro levels, which I'll get into in a moment later, and then something to explain, why do we have here July or September 2020 meeting final approval? Because of the the policies, the laws that CalSTRS has to follow in terms of timing of approvals and communication to employees, that's the magic behind the dates. So if we push it further back, then any adoption of the collaborative model would likely be delayed by another year past that. And that's again from the perspective that I've said this before, and I stand by my comment that you will have a hard time finding the right type of talent to manage the more so the private assets in-house without the LTIP. And that if somebody accepts a job here without that, I would ask yourself, do we have the right person? So that I just wanted to go. I apologize. I took an extra 5 minutes than I wanted there, but I thought the context was important.
Fine.
So what we heard in terms of some of the key themes of the November board session from the board as a whole, that wasn't just the committee, that was the board as a whole, is we had a good discussion around the internal equity issues that can be there, could potentially be there over time. And again, it's good that we're having this discussion. It's important that you think about the impact, because there's no way around it from the perspective that as you look to bring more money management in-house, you're going to have a delta in terms of pay levels. I would make the argument that today you have a delta in pay levels in terms of your current structure, not just, and we'll touch on it in a bit, not just internally, but as I said before, I see the investment managers that you hire as third parties, I see them as an extension of your workforce today, quite frankly. And they are getting paid more than investment staff are today. And then you've got other functional roles that are getting paid differences in that. So that's something that I think, you're just going to have to continue to look at. We also talked about the fact that, and there's a slide on this, that because of the way that you're very unique in terms of how you are structured, in terms of the board does not have complete oversight over all staff compensation. It's almost somewhat out of your control in terms of pay levels for some staff, that it's more in the hands of the state. And that's just something that, we're just going to have to, work through, et cetera. That touches frankly on point 2. In terms of the collaborative model, I think I've already touched on that in terms of the need to examine the LTIP. And to me, number 4 is critical. I've said this before, anything that we do, we need to make sure that if Sharon or Harry or any of you are standing up to your different stakeholder groups, that you can say, we're doing this for this reason, that, and the other party across the table says, I get it. I understand the reason why we're doing this, and I like it. And so in our experience, a large reason is we're trying to deliver higher net value returns to our stakeholders, and we're trying to return more money back to our stakeholders, be it the state or to our teachers. And again, we've seen it work over a 30-year period. We've actually never seen it fail. And it's a great situation to be in where, we've got clients where 25 years ago there was discussions around, potentially going bankrupt, and today they're actually over 100% funded. And so that's a good place to be, and hopefully, CalSTRS will be there one day. And then there was a discussion around the need to use more quantitative measures. We certainly have always been proponents of not being overweighted on qualitative. Qualitative can be harder to justify, to explain versus quantitative to your stakeholder groups. Okay, so this is definitely a unique slide to CalSTRS, but it's an important slide, I think, for people to understand. In your typical organization, even pension fund, the board has a fiduciary obligation over an oversight over all compensation. And I don't mean that they get involved in saying, okay, the secretary and finance should make this, but the board typically has overall oversight to say, look, we manage the compensation strategy. We will dictate what, say, the top 5 executives earn, and we will lay out what maybe the annual bonus plan looks like and the long-term incentive looks like, the benefits plan, the pension plan, and then we will delegate to the senior team to make sure that they are administering that to the levels below them. In your case, that's not the situation. In your case, the CalSTRS board has responsibility over the CEO, CIO, the jobs on the left-hand side green box there. And then you also have responsibility for the investment staff. And so on the other side, you do have the state of California that has oversight over all other staff. And so I think, again, I touched on it earlier in terms of the internal equity issues. This is very kind of, this is an art in terms of trying to balance it and doing it accurately. I think some of you rightfully in the past have said, whatever we do, and we certainly are proponents of this, we have to make sure that we preserve the great culture that exists at CalSTRS. And again, I've said it before, compensation is important, it needs to be competitive, but in my 30 years, I've realized it's not everything. If somebody only comes and joins an organization over pay, it's probably not a good idea for them for you to hire them. There's other things that keep people where they are. The managers that they work for, the culture that within an organization, the career opportunities. And I think CalSTRS has proven that, So again, it's got to be competitive, but there are other things that need to be important, and this ties into that. And so I think Melissa and her team and other senior managers understand this, and the board understands this, and it's just going to be a delicate exercise, more of an art than a science going forward to make sure that there is a good balance. So before I get into this slide, I don't want to ignore the other points that came up in terms of the compensation policy that the board left us with. With regards to those other points, those can be handled as part of the annual performance management process. And so some of you, actually, the only person that would remember, I think, is Harry, is that our first mandate 10 years ago was to create a new performance management scorecard process that was a little bit easier to follow, more linked to pay and performance. And I think from speaking to management, the board, and Amy, that tool is working pretty well. That tool allows you the flexibility every year to tweak it. And so if there's certain measures that you want to replace or modify, if there's certain weightings that you want to adjust, you have the ability to do that. And so that's something that you'll be able to look at in the coming months for those other items that, such as more quants, et cetera, that you'll be able to look at in the coming months. So we're really just focusing today, therefore, in terms of all the items that the board brought up on the long-term incentive plan. So what's the rationale? The rationale is something we started talking about several years ago. Yes, it positions compensation more competitively in terms of your peer group. If you look at your peer group and what they're doing, the majority of them do have a long-term incentive as a component. It definitely allows you to tie it more towards long-term investment returns. The STIP, I think we've done a pretty effective job of trying to do that. It's worked pretty good from that perspective, but nothing beats measuring long-term performance than using a long-term incentive. The third one, I think I certainly heard loud and clear from the committee, and we support it, is that, you know, the design, and this is unique, by the way, this is unique, doesn't mean it's a wrong thing that it's unique, but it's unique, is that the design has to be tied to the savings around the collaborative model. And I thought about this last night, actually. It's unique to pension funds, but it's actually not unique to publicly traded companies. Because if you think of a typical equity plan in a publicly traded company, let's leave technology companies aside, you know, it's pretty much SEC mandated that you say, look, you're going to be maxed out at about 10% sharing ratio of how much. So for every dollar of value you generate for shareholders, approximately 10% is going to be shared with employees, and 90% is going to go to the shareholder group. So there is some of that, but the idea of including cost savings is somewhat unique to pension funds. Where it does get included in many of our clients is in the explanation of the net value return, right? And I've mentioned this to some of you before. If you decide to go in this direction, eventually, and this is a good thing, eventually you won't be measuring the savings because you're going to be there, right? You're going to be, I doubt you'll ever be at 100%, fully 100% of your assets being internally managed. Most funds, you know, get to around 95%. They decide to keep certain functions like hedging and hedge fund type aspects outside. But you will get to the point where you hit that, and you just try to measure the cost of running CalSTRS as a whole and keep an eye on that going forward. And then lastly, I mentioned this already, it really is a requirement under not just the collaborative model, but the general concept of trying to hire people that frankly today might already be working for you, but they're just working for you in one of the third-party asset managers. And so the concept here has always been, you know, instead of those people working for somebody that they're generating a profit on CalSTRS dollars, we'd rather hire those people and then take that profit and share it with our stakeholder groups. So if you think about the typical compensation structure in the marketplace, this is definitely more particular to your peer group and pension funds. You've got, you know, the base salary, you've got a short-term, or some people call it an annual incentive plan, you've got an LTIP, you've got the pension and benefits to make up the total compensation package. And as I mentioned before, you know, this isn't new. We've known from the work that McLaughlin has done for you over the years that there is a gap in terms of the long-term incentive. And I've always said that my view is, as you look to close any type of pay gap, I would prefer to see you not increase base salaries, say above the median like you have. I'd rather see it linked towards a more of a pay for performance linkage. So that if they don't hit, at the end of the day, if they don't hit the numbers that you want to see and that frankly the pensioners want to see, there's no payout. And I think that's a good news story. So this is back to the 10% sharing example that I talked to you about public traded companies. I wanted to just touch on this because Paul, when he sat on the board previously, and Harry's brought this up, there's two components to a well-administered and well-designed long-term incentive plan. And I think a lot of pension funds in particular mismanage their long-term incentive plans. And so a lot of organizations focus on what I call the bottoms up, which is how much should I pay in LTIP awards to each individual employee? And the way you do that, you look at a peer group, you say, okay, what's the job? You know, what's the right apples to apples comparison for that job? And that's how much I should offer that individual in terms of an LTIP award. And you go across that, and that comes to a number. And most organizations stop there. And the reason that is wrong is because if you've over-awarded across on an individual basis, and you haven't actually determined on a macro basis, does that meet the smell test, you can get into a lot of trouble. And so what we always urge our clients to do is you do the bottoms up, but you also do what I call the top down. And so this is back to what I think Paul and Harry have mentioned in the past, is that's the top down, which is to say, okay, how much are we actually sharing in terms of value creation, or a percentage of all the value created with our team? If you look at what you're indirectly, or frankly directly already today doing in LTIP to third parties that manage money for CalSTRS, it's high. It's, specifically around, assets like infrastructure, real estate, and private equity. It's in that kind of 18 to 20% range, right? And what we're after here in terms of the collaborative model is we want to keep those savings. We still want to pay competitively, but the profit that's going to the third-party shareholders, CalSTRS wants to keep those and share those with its stakeholder groups. So, we'll get into a lot more detail around the numbers at the May session. But if you use some of the numbers that management at CalSTRS has used in the past, we certainly have reviewed them and audited them, compared them to some of our other clients, and we think they're realistic. That if you look at what in the past has generally been shared as a percentage of the value creation in other organizations that's similar to CalSTRS, it might be in the 2 to 4% range, right? And keep in mind, if there's no, you'll see in the next few slides, if there's no value being created, there's no payout, right? So that's point blank simple. But if management is successful at doing what the board is asking them to do, to go out and create risk-adjusted positive value creation, then you would typically see a pool or a sharing ratio of the 2 to 4% range, and then that would get allocated on an individual basis based on market compensation survey comparisons. Okay, so I'm going to go. This is where it can get a little bit complicated, and so the concept of LTIP is complicated, but I'm going to try to simplify it. And I'm actually just, before I go into this, to make it more simple, I'm actually going to go one slide over. So I find that most people relate easier to the concept of a short-term incentive than an annual incentive. In pension funds, because of the type of legal entity that you are, the long-term incentive is far more simple. If you look at the work that we do with publicly traded companies, I can make you dizzy in terms of PSUs and PRSUs and DSUs. It gets very, very complicated because of the legal entity types that they are and trying to take advantage of tax structures, et cetera. In pension funds, it's really actually quite easy. So the way I'd like you to think of it is, if you think of an annual bonus, where an employee is given an opportunity to earn X in a year if they achieve specific performance measures, the LTIP is the exact same thing, except instead of being on a 12-month basis, it's on a 36-month basis or a 48-month basis, or even longer. And so it's as simple as that. I'm going to go back now, because this is definitely a little bit harder to follow. So the typical long-term incentive plan has a term period of between 3 and 5 years. The most common is absolutely a 4-year period. And so what you're saying is, at the beginning of the performance period, you're saying to an eligible employee, that's the first box there, LTIP opportunity communicated. You're saying, and these are just example numbers, et cetera. You're saying to an employee, look, I'm going to give you the opportunity to earn upwards of $100,000 on this LTIP. And the way that you potentially earn this money is as follows. 1, that's the red box. If you leave for whatever reason over that 4-year period, you lose it all. So there's a very strong handcuff or retention factor, which I like, right? So if somebody wants to try to steal one of your key people, they're going to have to pay for whatever unvested LTIP is on the table for that individual. And it makes it harder for that individual to say, I'm out of here. Like, you know, I'm going. And if they do, you know, they leave money on the table. And so at the end of 4 years, the board sits down and says, okay, I had communicated to you that in order for you to achieve this award, you'd have to be here for 4 years, and over a 4-year period, you would have to achieve specific performance criteria. If you didn't hit that, you get 0, even though you stayed around for 4 years. And if you hit that and you've made me some money, then I'm going to share with you some of that value creation. So in this example, after the 48 months, you do the calculations, et cetera, and sometime in a 90 to 120 day window thereafter, there's a potential payout if the performance criteria has been achieved. Any questions there? I know that's a little bit, okay. And so I've already touched on this. Again, I always find it's easier to just explain that the LTIP is basically a longer period format of an annual incentive bonus plan.
Luis, I do have a question here.
Yep.
Betty?
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Luis. So you talked about the 4-year period as being kind of the most common time period. Okay. I guess just mechanically, so the 2 to 4% of savings that would be available for such a plan, is the 4% contemplated as a cap?
Yeah, so you're going to see in one of the upcoming slides, we are not proponents of an uncapped type plan. I think it gets you into dangerous territory.
Yeah, okay, good. And then I guess in the event that the savings were achieved, but the returns did not meet the 7%, would the funds set aside be then absorbed into the total fund return rate?
Can you say that again?
So let's say the savings were achieved, but the returns overall didn't reach the 7%. So would the funds that are set aside then be absorbed into the total fund return rate?
There's a slide on this coming up, but in that example, there'd be a 0 payout.
Okay.
So, sorry?
I think she's speaking to the cost savings.
You're asking if there'd be a 0 payout, or would there?
No, it's not the payout. What happens to the funds that are set aside?
Oh, the cost savings would be kept within the organization. If you want, I can just.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's almost there anyway. It just might be easier. So this is a colorful slide. So, but it ties in exactly into, I think, what Betty is asking. So, again, this is conceptually, you know, what we would recommend in terms of an overall design. So we definitely would be more of a proponent of a 4-year period. There are a few organizations that might use a 5-year period, and there are some that do a 3-year. You know, we think 4-year has a lot of good rationale behind it. So the way that we would see the design work is what we have heard loud and clear from this committee is what is the message that you want to send to your stakeholder groups, okay? What we've heard loud and clear is you want to send 2 messages. You want to send the message that we're implementing this to bring in the talent in-house so that we can manage more money in-house, so that we can generate cost savings, and those cost savings can be shared back with our stakeholder groups. And so cost savings is one driver of the design. The other is that we want to incentivize our staff to generate attractive long-term investment results. So if I've misheard anything from the committee, please let me know, but that is what I feel I've heard loud and clear in terms of what the type of performance or behavior that you want to drive. And so the way it would work is you would again, communicate a dollar opportunity to an individual, an eligible individual, as to what they potentially could earn under the LTIP over a 4-year period. And then at the end of 4 years, you'd sit down with something like this and you'd say, okay, we don't want to pay you just for showing up to work. That's your salary. So, and we don't want to pay you for just generating some fairly low returns or fairly low cost savings. We want it to be somewhat challenging. So we're actually going to set a threshold level of performance where you have, and these are just example numbers. So we're not married to these numbers. We try to make them, realistic and defensible, but these are not hard numbers. We want you to generate total savings under the collaborative model over a 4-year period of at least $200 million. And we want you to achieve an absolute return of at least 7%. If you don't achieve a 7% minimum return, your payout's zero. And if you don't achieve savings of that threshold, your payout's zero, right? So I created this other slide here. Where is it? Because it just shows it a little bit easier. So this just shows the concept, right? And it ties into what Betty mentioned earlier, that there's a cap. So again, we want to make sure that the message is defensible. When any of you are being asked, why is CalSTRS doing this, that you can communicate it effectively, and that the person at the other side of the table saying, okay, I get this. This makes total sense to do. So you could see at threshold, Betty, so you could be in a situation, I think now I'm going to answer your question, is that you could be in a situation where $100 million of cost savings is generated, and where, say, 5% of total return is generated, the payout would be zero.
Right.
But CalSTRS would still get 5% return and get $100 million of savings. But the payout would be zero. In order to there to be a payout, the board would say, look, we need you to work a little bit harder. We need you to generate more value for us. We want to see at least $200 million in cost savings over a 4-year period. We want to see at least a 7% return. And in that case, you're going to get a threshold payout long-term incentive plan after 4 years. If, on the flip side, you actually generate what we set out for you to be in terms of a maximum investment return and a maximum cost savings, we would be so happy to write that bigger check for you, because that means that our stakeholders have actually done exponentially more, better than that. But if you go over that, it's capped. We don't want to create a undesired risk profile where people are betting the farm to get more, right? And it just generates the wrong kind of desired behavior. So it would be then capped out. I think that now I finally answered your question,
I think it's just the mechanics of what do you do with the money that's been set aside from the savings if you don't reach the 7%?
Yeah. So
does that get absorbed into the total fund return rate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, sorry.
I guess I want to just keep us focused on, do you feel like your question got answered, Betty? Or no?
Yeah, no, I think I got it.
Because what I hear you saying is also that it's tied to the 7% annual, annualized return, and you have to achieve cost savings in order to earn the LTIP.
Right.
But I have a couple people in the queue, and I kind of want to move us forward, because remember, we're talking big concept, not too many details. So I'm going to move it to Gail and then Harry. Go ahead, Gail.
Madam Chair, would you prefer Mr. Navas to finish, and then I can hold my questions till the end, if that makes more sense?
Pleasure. So do you want to
I'm almost
finish up, Louise?
I've flipped in between slides, but it basically it's covering.
I think you can give us a summary. Actually, would be, because I think there's a lot of detail there, and I think what we're really trying to stay up is getting folks' questions on the LTIP and.
Yep. So this is probably a good summary of what I just walked through. So our recommendation in terms of an overall conceptual straw man design would be using a performance period of 4 years, that you'd have, as normal practice, you'd have annual award opportunities starting this year, but there actually wouldn't be any payouts starting for at least 5 years. And then assuming that people are actually hitting their performance criteria, you could potentially have a payout every year thereafter, starting in year 5, similar to the annual how the annual bonus plan works, just a different performance period. There would be 2 criteria that affects whether or not somebody receives a payout under the long-term incentive. One would be the savings from the collaborative model. 2 would be the absolute total fund performance over that period. And there would be a range of potential payouts, which would go anywhere from nothing to a capped amount of 100% of the maximum opportunity. And as I mentioned already, there would be no payouts for the first 4 years. The first payout, if the people eligible hit their criteria, would be in year 5. And then I'm just going to go right to the end. So depending on what occurs here today, well, today what we'd like to have is a good discussion in terms of the rationale for the LTIP, answer any questions that the committee members may have, definitely receive some direction in terms of how you'd like to proceed, in terms of things that maybe you'd like to see more for the May meeting, in addition to what we would be recommending we come back with, such as who should be eligible for the LTIP. That will be a meaty discussion. Determining what is market and competitive levels of LTIP opportunities for each of the individuals that the committee actually feels should be eligible. We are huge on making sure you do a ton of backward and forward testing around the potential payouts, so that you actually see under a whole variety of scenarios what it could look like based on different types of returns, cost savings, etc. And then you'd obviously would have to then kind of draft a policy document or administration document that gets into all types of things around how the LTIP is managed, what happens in terms of retirement, termination of cause, without cause, etc. And then, as I mentioned already, look at some of the decisions for the July and September meeting to finalize that policy, and then how it would be administered as a program. So that's that.
Okay. With that, Gail, do you want to jump in with your questions?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I understand how much work goes into this, and I'm really grateful for the commitment and how long you've been working on this, and the fact that I haven't been in this seat. So I do recognize the huge amount of history, and so would appreciate just a little bit of patience. We do have a lot of questions, and they're to kind of better understand the options and see how all of you and Mr. Navas, you got to this point. And I agree with so much of what you said. If there's no value being created, there's no payout. It's a strong handcuffs, the retention factor. I do want to just level set a little bit that salaries for many people are not just about showing up. I think it is an important point that we serve people who do so much more than show up and receive a salary. So I always like to have things within a context that we're looking for highly specialized people, and it's really important to implement the collaborative model, and we really support that and support the concept of an LTIP. But I think our questions are around have we sort of looked at all the options. So I want to be respectful, Madam Chair, of your time. We do at a very high level support where you're going. We have a bunch of questions about perhaps how we can get there. So some of them are sort of technical, and I'm going to start on slide 7. And this is to the controller's point too. It's a little bit about how the savings would be calculated. So we're looking at that pie chart. I sort of get where you're trying to go, but there's no quantitative data. So what is it 2 to 4% of?
Right.
I think is my question. And then, you know, the collaborative model is as remarkable as it is. we use it now in all parts of organization, which I think is important. But I also think it's really important to understand where the savings are coming from and how it works in concert with everything else the organization is trying to do. So I don't see that here, and I think that's a really important data point.
Yeah, so you never know, do you get too detailed? So our position today was don't get super detailed where people will, maybe lose the conceptual design issue. But for the May session, there would be significantly more detail around how the cost savings are calculated. And I think it's something that frankly management is still working on in terms of being able to deliver on it. We've offered to provide advice on how we've seen other funds communicated, et cetera. But at a high level, I know I'm oversimplifying it. It is challenging to calculate the cost savings, but at a high level, it really is that delta that you're currently paying to specific asset managers, the higher cost assets, private equity, infrastructure, and real estate. That how do you determine by moving those assets in-house what that cost savings become? And where it starts to get really tough is you have timing issues, right? So you right now is it's a little bit easier in terms of saying the cash that's coming in now as you allocate that there's going to be X savings, but those contracts that you may have today with certain third parties, you're not going to start to see those savings until those contracts end, and then the money shifts in that. So you're absolutely right. That would come in May. What we're trying to get across here is just in general that there's got to be a sharing and that there's got to be savings. Right.
I appreciate that. So I think the other piece then for May, you certainly don't need to answer it today, but is the costs of the collaborative model. So it does have, clearly there are huge savings, and we completely agree with that, but also really understanding how the costs are built in here, and specifically things like the building, the Pillars project, additional employees. So what we want to be mindful of is to implement the plan fully and effectively, that we're considering those costs as well as the savings, because they really aren't mutually exclusive. And we hear a lot about all the ways in which the incredible investment in the amazing building we just saw, like all the ways in which we're really trying to change CalSTRS for these purposes and making sure we include those costs. Certainly not something you have to address now. And then if we may, Madam Chair, turn to slide 9. On this, I think we see the startup costs, and I think this goes to the controller's questions, and but not necessarily what multiple cycles could look like. So perhaps in May, if we could really extrapolate out. So it's clear to me kind of what that first section looks like in those first 4 years, but maybe a longer time frame could be
Yeah, you're going to see that in the stress testing.
Yeah, so all of that, and that makes sense to me in the stress testing. And then just sort of the other piece of stress testing, of course, is the combination of the short-term incentive and the long-term incentive. So if we could just make sure that that's a piece of it too.
Would you like to go even further than that? My recommendation is don't just look at, so we normally would do it not just as a bucket of the LTIP, but I think the committee should see the total cost perspective.
Yeah, that would be great. And then, the other kind of piece is how we arrived at the timing and the implementation. And I do think your question in next steps for May is who it applies to. But I just kind of want to posit there's 3 proof points to make sure we're heading in the right direction with this LTIP specifically. I think we could sort of prove it for a year and bring it back to the board. We could limit the investment just to new employees. And then obviously we could just do it all at once. I couldn't quite tell if that's what you were thinking of here. It sounds maybe like it's not after listening to you speak. But I think they're different perspectives at which to come to this. And again, I'm happy to defer any of this to May, but just in terms of an information request for May, I think we'd like to see maybe playing those 3 scenarios out.
Yeah, it's probably a fair question for management to speak to in that, like from my perspective, I think our priority is trying to allow the board to have the tools to get access as quickly as possible to those savings, right? And so, you know, I personally think that even though the market data may come back and say these jobs are typically eligible for LTIP in your peer group, I can tell you right now, we're probably going to come back to you and say, I don't think you really need to start here. You can probably start here and then over a 2-year period, look at that. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I have 2 more buckets of questions, and then one is on attracting and retaining employees, and the other is on slide 12, just a little bit more kind of strategic thinking. On the attraction and retention, it's not a slide yet. I'm not quite there, sorry. Just on, you know, I'm interested, I understand sort of the worldwide view of pension funds and how we need to be competitive, and that makes a lot of sense to me. I am really pleased that even with that, our investment team is implementing the collaborative model. We saw some examples of that yesterday, some specific examples. But I'm interested in what specific talent you're going after to support the collaborative model. You know, I don't know if it's just kind of this worldwide perspective, if it's specific, if we're specifically looking at an internal talent base, if we're looking at CalPERS as an example, if it's kind of private capital. Like I'm really curious to know what talent we're looking for to better understand, rather than maybe just the worldwide perspective, sort of what talent profile we're looking for to better understand what we need, what need the LTIP fills.
I can only speak to what, if I was doing the recruiting or what I have seen my other clients do, but I would defer to Melissa and the management to talk to that.
We could have, yeah.
Hi, I'm Melissa Norsha, Director of Human Resources. So HR has been working closely with our Chief Investment Officer, Chris Ailman, and Scott Chan on those competencies. You know, what does that talent look like? And they're coming up right now so that we can update our classifications to ensure that when we do go out to recruit for that talent, that we're successful in doing so. We have some workarounds because that is a lengthy process to work through the California Department of Human Resources and establish a new classifications, and then also pay, which we're fortunate you're able to set compensation for those positions. But we are looking at the current classifications in order to fill the gap, and we have been working closely with Scott and Chris. And I'll let you kind of talk about the talent, because we've had lots of meetings and talks and trying to get all of that information out of their heads so that we better understand what talent are we seeking.
Yeah, first and foremost, we've got 5 positions vacant, portfolio manager positions and associate portfolio manager positions vacant in private equity. And there we're specifically looking for people that have co-investment actual experience. We are not, frankly, we're open to CalPERS, but we're not recruiting there. We are really reaching out to the Bay Area and to Los Angeles because we need, frankly, more transaction and investment banking skills. So our team's great. We have 4 people that do co-investments along with partnerships, but the vast majority of that team is partnership focused. And as Scott has said many times, transactions and co-investments are a different world. In real estate, we have 4 vacancies. We're looking for PMs and APMs as well. That's trying to fulfill 2 purposes. One is, as our CLCO said yesterday, succession planning. So we can hopefully find people that can come along our PMs and pull in the portfolio, but we're also looking people like the transactions you heard yesterday where we own the money managers. We need people with real estate operating company experience or investment banking experience. Kind of sadly goes without saying, there are very few people in this town with investment banking experience. They're going to be in the city centers with the big wirehousers. And that's why for us, the compensation is so critical, is those people are going to be coming probably private sector, maybe from another type of pension, but we just don't see that in the West Coast of any pensions that would be attractive to draw from. We've had conversations with both of the two headhunter or executive recruiting firms that we have a contract with. And that's why they've taken a look at our compensation and said, we're not going to be able to compete. I can give you live examples on the trade desks alone. June Kim lost 2 portfolio managers last year in her recruitment, both specifically due to compensation. And then Scott shared with me, I forgot about Glenn Hosokawa, lost a currency manager who was frankly coming from a Wisconsin pension plan and turned us down because of the compensation. So that's why we're bringing this to you. As I've said, we've done a wonderful job of building up from within, and the defined benefit really helps that, fulfills that. But now we're looking for people with actual skills that are different than our pool has. So while it's always open to internal recruitment, I have to follow the HR rules. We're recognizing the collaborative model requires new and different skills than we have primarily tapped into. Do you want to give any live examples?
Well, maybe I'll just tack on a little bit to what you were saying, Chris, in the sense that you can think about it simply. And historically, we were hiring fund managers like a Blackstone or a BlackRock, et cetera. And that takes a different skill set to hire a manager versus actually start to do what they're doing. As Chris was saying, in private equities, as we become a co-investor, that involves our team directly analyzing the same transactions as, for example, the Blackstone. And so as we are taking more of that management in-house, we're doing it at a lower cost than they can do it, but we're doing similar things as they do, right? And so if you think about the relationship, even just the relation management skills that are necessary to convince somebody to give us a portion of their company, like as we did an acquisition recently in real estate, Fairfield,
Elcor.
And we were in the running with another large money manager to acquire that stake. And so it takes somebody to convince them that we're a better shareholder, that we can help them with their strategic direction. It takes negotiation skills that are a much higher order than if we're just to negotiate a term sheet to hire a manager from a fund perspective. So these skills are becoming more difficult to find in the marketplace, and as Chris was saying, we're losing out on recruits, and we don't even know the level of the recruits that we're missing out on, because these are just examples of we know just anecdotally, but I think there's a far further set. I don't think we'll ever become competitive with the compensation of these private organizations, but I think we have to be in a range where the decision point with all of the things that we offer, including compensation, makes it attractive. And I'd say that another issue on the horizon for us is that as we're acquiring these organizations and working with them and doing some of the skills that they're doing, our folks are going to start to get plucked into the private sector and in some of these positions. And I think that's another thing on the horizon that we have to consider as we're talking about retention in terms of compensation.
Actually, that is a great lead-in to just is a better understanding of the immediate needs of recruitment versus retention. And then again, kind of what the universe, to Mr. Navis's point, when we look at May about who's eligible, where the greater needs are, and again, where the proof points are, right? So some of this is proving the point as we go, which again, I think you're doing an exceptional job of, but making sure that we maybe have a system for some of those proof points. And then, do you mind? So my last bucket of questions, I promise, is, and again, I really appreciate it and all the work you're doing to get us there, is just on slide 12, I understand the need to make this really quantitative, and we've talked about it before as a goal, but I also think in terms of the types of folks we're looking to recruit, we're also looking for a fair amount of sort of these qualitative qualities, like can you close a deal? Do you have any relationships? Are you coming in with relationships and credibility in order to be partners? So I don't see in here sort of where we'll really consider those qualitative pieces. And so that's one question. And then my final question is just sort of how the board thinks about its role in maybe reconsidering compensation writ large. So I don't know if you want to answer that one first, and then I'll move to the
So
last.
on the first one, and I apologize if it came across wrong when I say salary is paid for showing up to work, but so it gets tied into that. So typically, so LTIP is expensive, right? And so, pretty much 100% of the time, LTIP is paid out based on metrics that truly generate value. If you're a publicly traded company, it's total shareholder return. If it's a pension fund, it's returns, because of the fact that if people hit the numbers, the numbers are high. In terms of skill sets, that's typically captured under the salary. So, typically an organization will say, okay, based on your experience level, the role that you play, this is what your salary range is going to be. If you want to see yourself moving up through the salary range, these are the type of skill sets that so more qualitative, but it's still, to your point, getting addressed. So that's typically where the skills get addressed and rewarded, I guess, is in that salary bucket.
And we still have the annual personal evaluation that goes on for the short-term incentive plan. So that would still continue.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So I think just to bring back in May kind of where exactly the LTIP decision is made vis-a-vis the annual decision, but then maybe a little bit of a bigger question, and you will remember this from a previous board member, but whether the board could consider an alternate means of it, like a compensation philosophy or strategy, where in this LTIP idea, where there's a percentage of savings or a lump sum amount or something like this goes to, for example, the CEO and the CIO, and it is sort of that ability, rather than the board having the benchmarks and doing that setting, where it is sort of the board talks about the amount, but the delegation for who gets what when is delegated to the CIO. So the board would have this very large, high level view of either whatever we were to base that on, like total savings, total amount, however, cost versus savings. I think those are all the discussions we're looking at. But would there be sort of this opportunity then to delegate that ability to the CIO, given that some of this deal-making ability is not necessarily something the board could ever necessarily be able to assess? So I think it may, I don't know if that sort of decision structure and where the board weighs in versus the CIO, like if this is an opportunity to maybe look at that.
Yeah, so that'll come in May, and then also a follow-up in terms of next steps where I mentioned kind of the administration of it. But I can actually just take 3 minutes and touch on it now, because it's a very good point to go through. So we would be a proponent of the board having a fiduciary oversight over the plan at a macro basis, and similar to how the annual bonus plan works, where you would set, the pool size, right? That's why I kind of wanted to talk about the macro, the top down, because it's something that Paul and Harry had raised in the past, and we kind of stayed away from getting too much into it in that, but now's the time to get into it, is that there is that pool, right? And that we just, we need to do that, make sure that GGA does its job in terms of protecting the committee, that the pool is defensible. And then you have the bottoms up, where there's an analysis done around, what's competitive on a job-to-job basis. So the way it would work is the board would say, okay, we want the main drivers of this plan to be, again, I'm just throwing concepts out that I've thrown out here today, cost savings, and you're going to throw out numbers around what those cost savings would be. You're going to ask management, though, to come forward and say, what do you guys think? Like, we don't want to do all the heavy lifting for you. You tell us what you think is appropriate cost savings, and then we'll push back and tell you whether or not we think it's reasonable or not. And same with the investment performance criteria. So you would, as a board, sign off on, whether you're okay with what the criteria is, what the performance numbers behind the criteria is, and then what the general pool or sharing ratio is. You might say, Luis, actually, we're okay with 4.5%. Or, you might want to scale it based on results. Or you might say, we want it at 2%. And then where you would have responsibility for every year would just be, back to the earlier slide, the people that you have responsibility for. I don't want you to get into the weeds and be making decisions on below that. You would pass that responsibility to Chris or whoever it is, depending on who you agree to be eligible. What I will say, again, I don't like boards to get too much in the weeds. What I would say is it's good for you to hear back from management who they have decided to be eligible. Because back to the pool, if management decides that it's a great idea for the parking lot manager to get LTIP, I think you might want to opine on that, all right? Not that there's anything wrong with that, with the parking lot manager, but I had to park all the way on the 5th floor today. But as your advisor, I'd probably say you may want to rethink that, right? So that, I think I'm on the same page. That's how I don't want you to be spending. I want you to have oversight. At the end of the day, this is like all the other components. Costly to the pensioners, and you want to make sure that you're getting value from it. But I don't want you getting in too much into the weeds. But
no, I appreciate that. And then just in terms of everything we've learned about compensation in the private sector, I think that sometimes there are risks. And as I think before we approve any final compensation strategies, just understanding maybe what the risks could do and how we motivate our employees. So are there, do sometimes do incentives become perverse? I actually don't know in this arena at all, but I think it's just in terms of the board knowing, not wanting people to
take more risks
to either take more risks or not be really mindful of this core mission that we all share. So that sort of question when we're bringing folks in that maybe aren't as attuned to this type of public benefit, defined benefit culture, making sure that how we can align those cultural needs, I think it must be hard.
Yeah, so I would say 100% absolutely compensation plans can drive the wrong behavior. There's just unfortunately time and time again proof. I always have a long-term saying that greed kills. It's amazing how you have people that are financially making a lot of money and yet they decide to take undue risk, to get more in that. So that's back to the conversation that when Betty brought it up, is making sure that the plan is designed where you're not motivating the wrong kind of behavior. We don't want people to be incentivized to be aiming for non-risk adjusted returns. We don't want people, I would recommend that we cap the payout so that people don't say, oh my God, I can make 10 times more if I take even more risk. Well, we're not asking you to, we don't want you to do that.
So Luis, what I'm hearing, I want to move as long because we've got Harry and Joy in the queue and we're past our time and it's lunchtime. And so I just want to thank you, Gail. I actually think you asked a lot of really helpful questions. I'm assuming people were taking notes and so that we can make sure that we prepare the content of the next comp item in May so that we're addressing all the questions, the really smart, thoughtful questions that you asked. So I appreciate that. But I want to make sure we get to Harry and Joy. So Harry.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Absolutely.
I want to thank Ms. Miller for her comments and her questions. A lot of them I would lend my support to. I think the saying is hogs eat, pigs get slaughtered, Mr. Hollis. That's what happens. Hogs eat, pigs get slaughtered. So here's there's a lot here. So I'm going to try to keep it simple and mention some of the things that we do know. We know the cost of managing the portfolio. We now manage that, and Deborah Smith is providing us a report, and it was Mr. Rosenstiel and Ms. Hendrick who pushed for that, and we know what it costs to manage the CalSTRS fund, and we know that we've been doing some of bringing assets in-house in public equities, and June Kim and her team have done a remarkable job in doing that, where we're getting comparable returns at a lower cost. What we're talking about doing here is in a more complicated space where in the private asset classes where the disproportionately high percentage of our costs are to manage the fund and where we are dependent for returns to reach the pension promise and the 7% return is can we capture some of those cost savings and keep them in-house without compromising returns. And what we're hearing from our staff is that we need specialized skill sets, investment banking skill sets, and this is not to minimize Margot and her team or Mike DeRay and their team in any way whatsoever. They've done a great job. The returns are what they are, and they speak for themselves. But what we're hearing is that we need some specialized skills and some talents. And what we want to do in order to attract some of those potential candidates is create this LTIP. One, I support the long-term 4 to 5 years. At a minimum 4 years, for me, would be something that I would need to have that. Secondly, I have not settled on, but I am close to settling on, that if the total fund were not to achieve 7% return, which is our ultimate objective, we need to generate a 7% return to pay the pension promise. I would have a difficult time paying out an LTIP, and I think supports, Luis, your recommendation, is there wouldn't be a payout if the total fund was under 7%. So I think that's someplace that I've landed on. I support your recommendation that it would be a retention bonus as well, that in order for the employee or the employees who would receive this LTIP, they would have to stay with the system. It's a trade-off. You're going to bring these skills and these talents to help us to generate returns and minimize the cost to the fund. And we saw estimates, very rough estimates, to $100 to $200 million, and those are rough on an annual basis that we think we could save. But for you to generate that, you'd have to still be here. You can't do the work and then leave, and then we send you a check someplace else. No, you're going to stay, and you're part of a team. You're part of a team, the overall objective. So I think that retention factor is important. I'm very sensitive to perverse incentives that would incentivize taking greater risks. So I think we have to have some guardrails around that, and we need some guidance from outside experts as to what those guardrails would look like. Certainly need an independent set of eyes to say that truly those cost savings in year, pick the year, can be directly attributed to these transactions that would have cost the system. So really some independent, I don't have the ability to do that. I'm not sure if anybody on the committee has the ability to do that, but who would do that for us? That would directly link the savings to those skill sets, those talents, or those transactions that would have been paid to an external group that we now be able to capture. I think that's critically important. So where I'm at going into the next meeting would be who would be eligible for the incentive? What would the incentive amounts be? I would lend my support to there has to be a cap. And I think, Luis, it's like a 2 to 4% you used. I would start on a lower end, like be really conservative, and because there's a lot of I think there are people that are attracted to public sector work and the purpose and the mission of CalSTRS that can work and manage it and work under Chris Ailman, Scott Chen, and the team. People who want to do that, who have skill sets, this is a nice place to work. Right? There's a lot of benefits to working for and with CalSTRS. In addition to the purpose, no need to go raise capital. You have a defined benefit. There's a lot of variables. There's some attraction. So this LTIP, I think we should probably be on the more conservative side as to what that potential maximum bonus could be. And then if we get to a point where there's some consensus that we're willing to move forward, maybe we can push it up rather than coming in with numbers that perhaps some of us, the appetite wouldn't be there to support the overall concept. So those would be my overarching thoughts and considerations as we move forward. What those numbers would look like, who would be eligible, and I would, being sensitive to people that are impacted by this, I do think it is helpful through the appropriate channels that we would hear from people on the investment team who could give you guidance and feedback as to who do they think should be eligible, right? And how that would work out.
And probably hear from Nikita.
And of course, any independent advisors.
Yeah.
I hope that gives Luis, you, and Melissa some, and the committee as to how I'm thinking about the issue of an LTIP. Thanks.
Good, thanks. Joy.
Thank you. So I just, the comments and questions that Gail and Betty and Harry raised have all been helpful and I think are aligned with the kinds of things that I'm thinking about as I see this. I think I want to put an exclamation point on the comment that Harry made about looking at the concept of the LTIP as having a retention factor or some kind of vesting factor, potentially not just to be a payout, but maybe it's over a 2-3 year time frame. So I think that's something to explore. And then the other question I have, or piece of information I'd be interested in learning more about as we continue to explore this is, Gail referenced the fact that, we have had some experience or have some examples within CalSTRS already about initiatives that are kind of at least on one end of the collaborative model. We've already heard Scott and Chris from the investment teams about some of the initiatives that we already have, like in real estate, for example, that kind of reflect the concepts of the collaborative model. So I think better understanding how we were able to execute those given the current staff, but what's the distinction between the team that we already have that was able to execute those versus the kinds of skills that you talked about that we would need as we go out and recruit. And just, I'd find it helpful to understand that a little bit more as we think about, how do we measure the cost savings? Are we taking into account projects that are already here? Is it just new projects? Who are we recruiting and who's eligible? So I'd like to explore that a little more.
Okay. Thank you, Joy.
That is it. That's all. That's all, you guys. Jack, do you have, go ahead.
Actually, I had a couple questions myself. I think what we need, it doesn't necessarily could be May or September, but I just want to make sure we understand the legal parameters around the vesting for the benefit and how that plays out in an annual appropriation. Again, this isn't like private sector, and we're not under continuous appropriation here. So this comes out of an annual appropriation for the budget. So you're making legal commitments over multi-fiscal years. So I just want to make sure we've thought that very carefully through relative to the budget process and what commitments we are making to staff in that regard. So if you could kind of map that out for us. And then I don't know if this is for Melissa or Luis. I'm sure there's a straight answer for this, but I just want to ask it anyway. I mean, retention bonus is a nice positive word, but the reverse of that word is a handcuff. And I've seen this happen before in the workplace where we provide compensation that essentially handcuffs people to the workplace because there's money at the end of the day if you keep working there. So you're essentially interfering with the natural fluidity of the labor market by having those kinds of handcuffs. Do you find that's an issue at all from a human resource perspective, that it creates any perverse outcomes of making sure, because it really says, I'm going to work those 4 or 5 years no matter what, and this is in a civil service environment. So again, not like a private sector environment, it's civil service environment. Just any concerns there that we should not, because retention's not our problem here, that I would say, it's recruitment.
Right.
I mean, the best benefit of this is getting into other labor markets for recruiting staff we haven't successfully recruited. I think there's real value there. So it's not the retention piece of it. So is this the right response to the recruitment problem? I just want to make sure I understand that.
So the challenge that I've raised with Melissa in the past, and we've talked about, is when the type of people that Chris and Scott mentioned about hiring is you need to now move to a situation or a state of mind that if somebody's underperforming, you got to deal with it. Like you can't so you can't just keep a high paid underperformer in private equity, et cetera. So if somebody is, if I understand your point correctly, if somebody's sticking around because they have a nice LTIP payout to expect, that's usually an issue, because it usually flags that you have an underperformer, because that person, if they're good, they're going to be getting a phone call at least once a year to go work for somebody else, right? If they're not getting those phone calls, then again, that's a red flag.
Well, I'm not concerned about people at the tails of the curve. It's the people in the center of the curve that are okay performers. Does that handcuff keep them in the system longer?
Yeah, so potentially, and then that's where I think, again, you have to uncover that under the performance discussions around salary, and then also under the annual bonus. And then that's that call to say, okay, we have somebody that maybe, is just chugging along, isn't really the kind of person that we want to be that high performer. And again, I've asked this, can CalSTRS deal with underperformers properly?
Okay. Anything else? Okay. We're gonna wind up. I think, did you want to say something, Chris?
I just want to give a live example.
Go ahead.
To help, because I know Luis doesn't participate in the details in the annual evaluation. Our one-year incentive, 0 is a real number. So if an employee underperforms, their personal component can go to 0. So they would have nothing in there, that 20%. If they are severely underperforming, then the entire incentive is taken away. So we probably have that kind of a trigger in the LTIP, that if they lose their annual incentive, the LTIP disappears for that time period. And I can tell you at least twice we have had that experience. And when the employee knows that their incentive is now gone, their resume is out and they're looking for things. So I think we have the tools in the short term to really manage those kinds of employees. The average employee, I don't have experience with it, so we'd have to see. But
and the only other thing I would say is I think we'll get to it in terms of administration of it. But if you have somebody that you see isn't moving along in the direction that you want them to, it would be normal to actually hold back any more awards. So you actually wouldn't just keep giving them more LTIP awards. You'd say, and then that you're sending the direct message, you may want to be looking elsewhere.
I think what we'll do is, that's a lot of really good questions, and I think it's a lot of good fodder for you, Luis and Melissa, in preparation for May. And I think what we'll do as chair and vice chair of the comp committee, we'll work with both of you to ensure that all of those questions are addressed in the conversation in May. I do want to just get a sense from the committee, though. My sense is today that we support the idea of a long-term incentive. The question's just going to be, for who. So I won't reiterate all the questions that were asked. I think there's a lot more detail that we need to flesh out, and my hope is that in May we can flesh out those details. But for today, I think there's overall support from the committee to pursue the LTIP. Is that fair to say? So it's not an action item, it's an information item. So we're giving you direction to say we approve with the general concept of an LTIP. We need more detailed information in terms of different options and some of the input that different folks gave in order to give you more direction in terms of the specificity of how that's going to play out. And we'll work offline between now and May to make sure we keep it simple and clear and focused on those questions.
And I would just add,
Sure,
Madam Chair,
please.
To the extent it's appropriate, and I'm sure there's some clear lines of where it is and it's not, I would think that you would get feedback and input from the appropriate people on the staff in terms of what types of, to the extent it's appropriate. Okay, thank
Great.
you.
Thanks so much. And we have public comment. Pat?
I was just saying, as a teacher, it makes me a little bit nervous because if we were graded or we were paid on how our students did, you get a lot of perverse behavior and perverse situations. So I think incentive is wonderful, but proceed with caution because it can be the wrong incentive for some people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat, for your input. Appreciate that. With that, I think we're gonna break for a short lunch, if that's okay. Can we just take a half an hour? And I'll work with Melissa. We have a couple more items left in comp, but Melissa and I will chat about those. So lunch, and then we'll come back at 1:40. Okay, to finish up the rest of comp, and then we have appeals after that. If you're not on appeals, you get to go home. What?
So thank you so much.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just wondering, is there any way? which is an information item talking about education. It's going to help us understand civil service. And and Melissa has been kind enough to abridge the presentation so that we can be down around 2-ish, if you will. So we won't time it, but we'll just, ish. Thanks, Melissa.
Resources, and with me today is Crystal Turco. She's our Assistant Director of Human Resources, and she leads some of our human resource programs for the organization. If I can just rewind and refresh the committee's recollection of why this topic is being presented today. During past compensation committee meetings, while you were setting, compensation for those positions that you have authority for, you've often acknowledged the entirety of the CalSTRS workforce and their achievements toward accomplishing some of our strategic goals and objectives and priorities, as well as internal equity. And so hopefully the presentation that will be presented today will capture some of that information. I am going to kind of elevate us up and keep us more at the strategy level as opposed to getting too much into the details. But we are going to focus on various compensation plans for CalSTRS workforce and those interdependencies with the Teachers Retirement Board and the California Department of Human Resources. This is an education session, and I want to make sure that if the board has questions, the committee has questions, that we are responding to those thoughtfully. Moving right along, let's start off with the CalSTRS workforce snapshot. This shows the total number of filled positions in the organization as of January 31st. We have 1,205 total filled positions. I'm just going to highlight 66 of those positions are ones for which the board has compensation setting authority for. All other positions, their compensation is set by the state of California and managed through the California Department of Human Resources and the collective bargaining process. We do have 803 represented staff. We have a couple of unions that represent our staff. One is the Service Employee, excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. The Service Employees International Union, which is also referred to as SEIU Local 1000, and they represent our professional, administrative, financial, staff services, and support services staff. So that's actually the largest percentage of the organization is represented. And then we also have another union that represents the attorneys in our general counsel office, which is California Attorneys in State Employment, also known as CASE. Moving right along, this chart represents the organizational structure at the executive and investment management level. We have a chief executive officer who oversees the organization. The chief executive officer position is the only exempt appointment we have in the organization, which means that the position is exempt from civil service. Reporting to the chief executive officer is a chief operating officer, a general counsel, a chief financial officer, and the chief investment officer has dual reporting relationships. So the chief investment officer reports administratively to the chief executive officer and then reports directly to the investment committee on the investment functions. System actuary reports to our chief financial officer in our financial services branch. All of the positions that I've highlighted thus far represent the 66 positions that you set compensation for. There are 4 other executive career executive assignment positions that are listed that report to our chief operating officer, and they are the public affairs executive officer, the chief technology officer, the chief of administrative services, and the benefits and services executive officer. What's not included in this slide, because it would be quite difficult to include the entirety of our workforce, is other layers of management and supervision, and of course our professional staff in the organization. We have 24 other career executive assignment positions with employees that serve in director roles and senior leadership roles. Our plan, Crystal and I, we are going to touch on the items that are listed here First, we are going to touch on the Teachers Retirement Board Compensation Authority. Secondly, Crystal is going to talk to you a little bit about the CalHR Compensation Authority, as well as the collective bargaining process. And then finally, we'll end with the unique incentive programs that we have here at CalSTRS. So this slide represents the compensation background, how we came to be with our compensation policy. Sometimes you have to go, you have to look in the past in order to know how you arrived here in the present. Why does the Teachers Retirement Board have a compensation policy? And preparing for this presentation and specifically this slide, I've been ensuring that I had all my ducks in a row to highlight some of the key events that took place in order to arrive at the compensation policy that's in place now. I read a lot of materials, and it really refreshed my mind on really the importance of our compensation policy. And I'm not gonna tease out the details of each of these events. I'm really gonna keep us kind of at the balcony level. And it's, when I went through the materials, it really spoke to the sole purpose of your compensation policy. And I think there's times when we get caught up in the mechanics of compensation, and that can sometimes be, overwhelming. And so really the sole purpose of your compensation policy is what we've been talking about in the earlier session. It's to attract and retain key executive and investment management positions to support the execution of the organizational goals and our investment operations. And it's just closely connected to that promise to our membership, which is, securing the financial trust of our membership. And so I want to just share that with you at the highest level. The compensation policy in place now, almost 3 decades later from where these events occurred, it has gone through some changes, and along the way you've made some adjustments, but for the most part, the principles have remained the same. We've updated it to really focus on, at the strategy level, what do we need to do to ensure that the policy incorporates those components that support you achieving that sole purpose, which is to ensure that we do have the key positions and the right people in those jobs to support our mission. And then, talking about the policy, these are the components within your policy. We often refer to them as the tools in your toolkit that you're able to leverage in order to attract that talent. For the most part, I'm not going to go into detail because I want to really be mindful of your time. What I want to share with the components that you have right now in your policy is they've served you well. They are compensation components that have attracted and have retained executive and investment management staff. I look behind me and I think of our investment management team, and you couldn't ask for a more top-notch professional staff. And so to the extent that any additional enhancements are made to the compensation policy, we've just talked about the long-term incentive proposal. That's another compensation strategy that the board is considering including in this compensation policy, and aligning it to, would that compensation strategy help support us as we move forward with the collaborative model? So I really think that, like I said, what you have in place so far has really helped support and made sure that the organization has those key executive and investment management positions that are necessary to carry out the mission.
So one of the, one of the many departments that we interact with on a regular basis is CalHR, or the California Department of Human Resources. They are the governor's representative during collective bargaining. And typically how the process works is CalHR Labor will reach out to departments to understand our individual priorities for collective bargaining. This last round of negotiation, which the contract, they did, SEIU and CalHR did come to an agreement on a contract that went into effect in January of this year. We had a couple priorities that we shared. One was expanding the Investment Officer 3 performance recognition program. And I'm happy to share, and I'll go over that in a little more detail, that that was one of the items that the two entities came to an agreement on. Another way we interact with CalHR in relation to your authority is the establishment or modification of classifications. So once the board fixes compensation, staff and HR have to prepare the necessary documents to submit to CalHR. CalHR typically will review those, and if they agree with the concept in theory, they will complete the necessary documents to submit to the State Personnel Board. Once the State Personnel Board takes action and approves a classification or approves a modification, CalHR is then tasked with creating pay letters or basically instructions for the State Controller's Office. And it's a little strange to be sitting right here and talk about the process with the State Controller sitting right there, which essentially updates the state's payroll system. This, at this very high level, sounds like a very simple process. It's often a months-long process. You know, recently during Governor Brown's administration, the focus of CalHR and State Personnel Board was really on class consolidation, so really reducing the number of classifications that we utilize statewide. And how that would impact us is oftentimes CalHR would look for classifications that could somehow fit our needs rather than create a new classification. But lately what we've experienced is CalHR actually modifying our classifications for use with other departments. So using the Chief Operating Officer classification as an example, that was established in 2017 when the board fixed compensation. That classification was established, an incumbent was appointed. Almost a year later, CalPERS took similar action to create a Chief Operating Officer classification after their board had fixed compensation. But rather than approve a new classification for CalPERS, CalHR actually took action to modify our classification. It's now a statewide concept with 3 separate salary ranges, one for CalSTRS, one for CalPERS, and one for statewide use. CalHR is also responsible for modifying any pay mechanisms that we use to issue pay, otherwise known as modifying pay differentials. These are the documents that we utilize to issue incentive pay, for example. And I think what I want this board to know about pay differentials is, although we use those relative to various incentive programs, there's hundreds of pay differentials available to various state employees at all levels. So for example, staff in our contact center, depending on their classification, may be eligible for a retention pay differential. Or staff that have a CPA and perform duties relative to financial examining or auditing may be eligible for a pay differential as well. For positions that are not under this board's compensation authority, that responsibility for setting the compensation for the state's workforce really lies with CalHR. And that's typically done in conjunction with collective bargaining. When CalHR comes to an agreement, and that maybe includes a salary adjustment for represented staff, CalHR also makes the determination whether or not those salary changes are going to apply to those positions that are excluded from collective bargaining, so the non-represented staff, the leadership. And then finally, CalHR is also responsible for a total compensation survey for the state workforce. Beginning in 2013, the state total comp survey compared employee wages, pay differentials, health benefits, retirement paid leave, and other compensation with local government, private sector, and federal employees doing similar work, similar occupational groups in different geographic areas. Prior to 2013, the methodology was a little bit different, where they surveyed the maximum salary and maximum benefit of state employees with the median max salary and median max benefit paid to employees performing similar work in various public sector employers throughout California. Okay. So here at CalSTRS, we have 3 unique incentive pay programs. I think you are most familiar with the compensation program for the executive and investment management positions. The CEA recognition pay program provides an opportunity for executive CEA positions. So again, public affairs executive officer, chief technology officer, Chief of Administrative Services and Benefits and Services Executive Officer would be eligible for CEA recognition pay. And then the third program is the Investment Officer 2 and 3 Performance Recognition Pay Program, which was expanded due to the last round of collective bargaining.
And I'm sure this looks very familiar to you. So this is your incentive pay for your positions in the executive and investment management eligible area. The positions are listed there. The maximum, the second row there reflects the 2019-20 performance year. And then the last row there shows effective July 1st, 2020, the maximum incentive opportunity that eligible staff will be eligible for. The framework of your incentive plan, is you have the incentive pay tied to incentive opportunity levels, and so that really is reflective of that max column there. It is comprised of quantitative and qualitative components, and those are weighted, and based on the compensation policy, the weighting leans more heavily toward quantitative, which is purposeful, and that's designed by your input and in the policy. I'm not going to spend too much time here unless you have questions, but I know you're familiar with this structure. I think the more important focus is probably on those other incentive programs that Crystal can kind of touch on.
So the CEA Recognition Pay Program was established in 2005 in recognition of the responsibilities of executive staff and also to address internal equity. At the time this program was implemented, I believe most of the executive team here at CalSTRS was in a CEA or a career executive assignment classification. We know over the years, the education code has been modified to include additional key executive positions. So now this is a very limited program. It is based on...
Crystal, sorry, can you back up? You said something about internal equity.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that this program was to try and have there be more internal equity in terms of incentive pay at the executive level? Is that, okay.
Yes. I believe most of you received an update during the November board meeting about our efforts to expand this program to include all of the CEA positions here at CalSTRS. That is something that we've been working on for a while and will continue to do so.
And that's how many positions, CEA positions?
20, it would be 28
Yeah,
positions?
we have 4 that are in the incentive, the CEA incentive pay plan now. It would be 24 additional CEAs.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then finally, our Investment Officer 3 and 2 Performance Recognition Program. As I mentioned earlier, this was established in 2007 via collective bargaining. At the same time that the Investment Officer 3, that's how it was established originally, program was established, there was also a pay differential that was established for Investment Officer 1, 2, and 3s that would provide 5% of base salary, or excuse me, monthly salary for those that had a Chartered Financial Analyst or CFA professional designation. One of the caveats or asks when the union and CalPERS and CalSTRS came to an agreement on this recognition program was really to come back in a number of years and assess the program and see if any additions or changes were needed. So fast forward to the current negotiations, the union and CalPERS and CalSTRS did come to an agreement that really expanded this program. So it increased the opportunity for an Investment Officer 3. Formerly, it was at 15%. So it increased to 20%. And it also incorporated the classification of the Investment Officer 2s. So the Investment Officer 2s starting July 1st are also going to be eligible to receive an incentive award of up to 10%.
And Crystal, when you say in CalSTRS and CalPERS,
yes,
we have the same job classifications.
We have
in
similar.
These particular...
CalSTRS has our own investment officer classifications. CalPERS has their own department specific investment classifications. They're very similar. Typically, when it comes to negotiations, since we are very similar departments and sometimes our priorities for our departments are similar, there's strength in numbers when it comes to bargaining. And so we oftentimes will reach out to our partners across the river to see if they have the same priorities. And in this case, they did. And so, like I said, we came to an agreement and very happy with the outcomes. Okay. One other thing I want to add here, we did have a priority to modify that CFA pay differential, which I mentioned earlier. We wanted to include additional professional designations for staff to be eligible to receive that additional salary. Unfortunately, that did not move forward. We really wanted that pay differential to mirror what we offer to our investment managers. That just, I think, for reasons of the larger negotiation strategy, just was not considered during this last round of negotiations.
Whew. Look at you, Melissa. Nicely done.
Well, we
That's a
butchered
lot.
that, huh?
We did. You said 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
You guys are great.
So just to recap, we touched on at a very high level, more at the strategy level for the board authorities. And then Crystal, I think it was important for Crystal to spend a little bit more time on the CalHR piece, because that really is the interest of the board of how those processes intersect with CalSTRS, and then, of course, the incentive pay programs that are in place for certain positions. The one thing that we didn't touch on, and it was what Luis had mentioned earlier about, compensation, and I appreciate that the board, has often, as I mentioned, brought up compensation and internal equity, and being thoughtful that there's a larger team here in the organization that support all of the great work that's happening. We do have other offerings that attract employees here. We have a learning and development program that is top-notch, that, others come here. They actually seek out this department because that's an offering that they don't have at their state department. We have a wellness program. We have a focus on sustainability. We have this great building. So there are other offerings that are not, they're not tied to compensation, but they are important to people. Work-life balance, being able to walk outside along the Riverwalk and work in a very collaborative organization. So I do want to add that, because I thought that was a point well taken by Luis, because there are lots of employees that come here every day, and they put in the good work and their time. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that separate and apart from actual tangible compensation.
That is very well said, Melissa. Thank you. Thank you, Crystal, for the presentation. I don't see any questions, but thank you for being thank you for being responsive. It definitely helps me to kind of organize. I think the board is fairly clear about what our mandate is in terms of comp and what our purview is, but I think as we have the observation I make when we talk about, especially with CalPERS and CalSTRS, is just, the flow is a little different, with continuous appropriations over there, and for us, we have a different. So I think there are challenges with that, and I think sometimes it's advantageous for us to be similar, and then it just seems like there are challenges in the ways that maybe we're different and hampered by that sometimes. So obviously, whatever we can do to work with our partners, around the city to be able to hire and get the right people at the right place and incentivize them. And also, I agree with you, Melissa, there's so many other things about this building that attract people here. You got to pay a mortgage and pay the rent, and you can only do that with, dollars. So I think just getting this right, I think, as you saw earlier with the earlier conversation around the LTIP, it's, comp committee is always challenging, I think, because we just want to make sure that we're asking the right questions. And then also when we do make I'm very aware of how much teachers are paid in California. I'm in negotiations in my union right now, and with community college faculty, it's, you look at how educators are paid, and sometimes it's hard in these environments to have these conversations, and yet I recognize with the work that we're doing and the value we're giving and creating for our members, we need to have them. So I really appreciate you helping us understand the bigger picture in the building, how our folks are compensated, and we'll continue to press on. So thank you. All right. With that is our last info item, and I don't believe we have any information requests. We have a lot of information requests, but I'm lumping them into feedback for Luis and Melissa for May. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's correct. It was stated that use the phrase information request was Ms. Miller said use that phrase with respect to cost and savings scenarios. I think relative to the collaborative model, but I think that was similar to the other questions that were presented for him to bring back.
Thank you, and we'll make sure that gets captured in our preparation for the May meeting. So thank you, James. The draft agenda for the next committee. Can we just take a look at that briefly? I need to find mine here. Melissa, is there anything you want to highlight on the agenda for?
No, Luis will be coming back with a little bit more detail on the long-term incentive. The other item, and it will depend on staff's ability to put a little bit more structure in place, is the investment management classification proposal that I mentioned Chris, Scott, and myself and HR staff are working on. That would, if it was not fully baked, but baked enough to bring before the board, it would really speak to some of the skills and abilities that we're looking to support the collaborative model. So that would present to the committee additional insight into what that looks like. And that's slated to come back in May.
Melissa? On the review investment management organizational structure, that's bringing classifications for the board to review, is that correct?
Well, two things. It's introducing, hopefully, proposed classifications, but also compensation.
Okay, because I think that we were going to put that as an action item, and I don't think it got fixed on this agenda.
Okay.
So just to let you know. Okay,
all right, then that would probably change to an action
So
item.
here and I can work with you on the agenda. I think my one thought would just be given the feedback from today in terms of the LTIP item, I don't know how much, I think we're gonna have to time this out and see what's gonna work with, since our board meetings are, 2 days in May, how we'll time out with those items, because I think that LTIP conversation could be another chunk of time. So
Okay.
we'll work together as chair and vice chair of the comp committee, right, Mr. Vice Chair? With Melissa and Louise to make sure we shape that item to be efficient and effective and figure out how the May meeting will look. Because it sounds like there's a couple of different items and we just want to make sure we're not bulking up.
Overwhelming the
That's
board.
right.
Yes,
That's right. We
I
have
understand.
time, so we can
Yeah.
put things on the next agenda, so. Anything else? Any other comments about the agenda? Great. Thank you, Melissa.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Crystal. Appreciate it. And we have opportunities for statements from the public. Anyone want to talk about compensation? You need a raise? I said that from my faculty down at LACCD right now. So, all right, thanks so much. And the comp committee is adjourned. So thank you. So anyone who's not on appeals is welcome to travel home safely. And that means you too, Mr. Oh, you staying for appeals? Okay, great. So let's take a 10-minute break and have appeals start at like 2:20. So 8-minute break, if you will. Start appeals at 2:20. Thanks.